My name is Margaret Cosh, and I was born in Sunderland in this area, but being the daughter of a section foreman, we moved to Orillia and lived there until I was almost 7. And at that time, my father became the section foreman in the CN railway from Manila almost to Lindsay, and we lived at Mariposa Station. It was a good place to live, and I found that my childhood, as I thought back on it to prepare for today, was a very stable environment, and I'm thankful for that. We moved to Mariposa Station, and we were amid a lot of freight sheds. Hog and Lytle had sheds, the CN had sheds, freight sheds where things were stored when they were going to and from before shipment. And of course there were kittens there that we enjoyed taming. The house itself belonged to the railway. It was only about 3 car lengths from the rails itself. This meant that we were really involved in the life of the railway. There were trains coming and going, passenger trains. We often took advantage of the passenger train to Toronto because my parents had a pass, and so did we as children. And the conductors and trainmen got to know us, so they didn't always take our one-trip pass. They would nod, and my mother would stow it away for the next trip. It was a lovely place to live, and we attended church, attended school at the station school. It was about a quarter of a mile down the road, and we had excellent teachers. One was a McGilvery from Dalrymple, one was a Prowse from just down the road, and a Margaret Graham. I'm sure many people will remember her. The school didn't have indoor facilities at first. The bathroom was the privy was out in the woodshed at the back, and it really was a scary thing for a young girl to be going out there alone. Later, there was an addition made to the school, and there were chemical toilets installed. We thought that was really getting up in the line. There was no water at the school, and somewhere between the age of 7 and 12, my sister and I were sent to the neighbors for water. The older children did this, but this was our first. And when you go to a farmer's windmill, there was something we had to do to the pump itself. We had to insert a bolt or take out a bolt, and in the process the handle of the pump came up and hit my sister on the nose, resulting in a nosebleed. So it was bad enough to injure her, but I sent her back to the school alone, and then I followed the blood trail all the way back, which was really disconcerting. We had a good time at the school. We had Arbor Day, which we enjoyed. There were school concerts, and my parents' car was always full of stage effects. We wondered how we'd get them all home after the concert was over. It was fine playing outside, but on a rainy day we had to go down into a very dusty basement. There were big blocks of wood that they couldn't have put in the furnace, and we played there. I remember cleaning up, we started to clean up. The job was never finished. We had lots of fun playing bally over. As young children, we could get the ball over the entrance of the school, but it took one of the older ones to get it over the top of the big building. We played baseball, tag of different sorts, hopscotch, but the thrill of all was the swings. There were 3 swings. Some of them had long metal poles that you could grasp. There were joints in the middle. But the thrill of all was a young girl, getting on with one of the big boys, because they could pump the swing up until it was going out level, and you just wonder if your shoes are going to hang on to the swing. When public school was over, we went to high school in Little Britain. It was at Little Britain Continuation School. In the building, there were public school classrooms on the east side, grades 1 to 4 in one, 4 to 8 in the 5 to 8 in the other, and then across the hall were the 4 grades of high school. We had to go to Lindsay for grade 13, and we boarded at Claire Western's place that year. They have a garage here in Lindsay, or had one. Life in the railway section house was quite an event. When we first moved in, there was no hydro. And the railway said, if you want hydro, you'll have to install it yourself, and you have to promise not to remove it when you go. We never even thought of that. There was a privy out in the yard, and for water in the wintertime, my mother used to use a boiler. It was sitting on the stove, and she would melt the snow, fill it high with snow to get the water for the bathing. On a very windy day, the house was so drafty that the linoleum in the floor would heave, and you'd step down and the floor was somewhere below. For fuel, my father unloaded ties that had outlived their usefulness, and a sawyer came in and sawed those up for us. Of course, there was creosote in them, and the pot-bellied stove was often red hot and just a thumping. Sometimes when we came back, it would be doing this, and it was scary. We didn't have a phone until I was in high school, but we could go up to the station and use the phone at the station anytime we needed it. There were also floods in the basement of the house. I remember one year it was up almost to the floor level. Anything down there, like jars that weren't very heavy, that were floating around. In the summer, we had rain barrels at the back of the house, and that's where our water came from. My mother was one to economize, and we have to thank her for all that she did to make our home not only pleasant, but almost extravagant in our eyes. She sewed dresses, pajamas, house coats, quilts, and she came to the shirt factory in Lindsay here and got pieces of shirts. That made wonderful quilts. It was new material, but she also used old material like old dresses in the quilts as well. She knit socks, mitts, heavy socks, and she went picking berries. She would ride out on the little, we called it the motor, to pick berries along the side of the right-of-way. There was no freezer, of course. In the fall, we went to Swain's in Valencia and bought barrels of apples to eat during the winter. There was a lot of recreation there. We skated in the field in the spring when it melted and then froze. We went to the arena when we were older. We went skiing and snowshoeing, and the best part of the summer was being able to walk down the railway track about a mile, and there was a bridge, and we would try to swim, but there were too many bloodsuckers there. but we would watch the fish and float things in the water. Springtime brought a special activity. We would get a piece of wood about the size of our hand and float it in the ditch going down to this bridge. The railway gang had to dig the ditch down that far, and it made good sailing for us. We used to do a lot of entertaining, not elaborate entertaining. We invited the teacher quite often. Visitors came. Sometimes when visitors were there, we'd have a sing-song, but we had a lot of sing-songs without visitors. My mother played the piano or organ. We had guitars that we played. And the B&B gang that was sitting on the siding across from the house often came over to take part in the sing-song as well. We had things delivered to the home. One was milk, and the bottles had cream tops. There was a bulge in the top where the cream would rise, and on a cold day, if you didn't get it in time, the cream would and the milk would freeze, and then it would pop the cap up. We had a little dipper that was especially made just to dip the cream out of that bulge in the glass. Kitsons in Little Britain delivered meat to the door, and there was a bakery, I think it was in Cannington, and a man by the name of Teddy Apps had a truck. It had shelves in it, and he would bring bread for us to buy. We liked the round loaves best. When Teddy opened the back of his truck, there was such a heavenly smell came out, that smell of fresh bread. It was wartime during my years of growing up. I remember my mother being in hot water one year because she took the ration carts and bought honey, and then realized that she hadn't saved any of the cards to buy sugar for her baking and things. One year we had to go and gather fluff from the milkweeds, and this was used in flotation for the servicemen. We were able to save gas even when there was rationing because we had the passes on the railway. So this was great for us. We could keep going even if there wasn't gas. I remember enjoying Spam. I don't remember having it until the wartime, and we really thought that was great, even if the company were coming. Even as children, we saved coins for the war effort. And I remember very well when I was in high school and VE Day, Victory in Europe, was declared. And the classes all went out and made a big V at the flagpole. There were so many pluses living in the Mariposa area. We attended welcoming churches. My father had reliable employment. My mother was industrious and caring. And we benefited from her university training too. She had studied 3 years to be a medical doctor. My mother, being having medical training, always was interested and interested us in the medical field. We played nursing and doctors as we were growing up, and I planned to go into nursing after high school, but I had been accelerated. Took 4 years in 2 during public school, so I was too young to become a nurse, and I decided to go to teachers college during that extra year that I had. And when I got to teachers college, I found that, well, this is what I want to do. as a vocation. So I quite enjoyed the years teaching. It was when Jim Brown was given a trip to Japan for his work in the anniversary of Lindsay, that he said, "Why don't you come to Japan?" And I said, "No, I'm not interested in Japan. A friend and I are going to Australia." But the seat sale was cancelled, and when I went to an orientation meeting about the trip to Japan, I found that 2 of my Teachers College classmates were there, and they were going, so I decided to accompany them. I went to Nayoro, and I found the culture so interesting and so different, and I wanted to learn more about it. So when I got home, I wrote to the one who had been our translator when we were over there. Rob Whitmer is his name, and asked if he would like some help next summer, because he was a teacher at an English school there in connection with the church. He said yes, because the Canadian who was teaching there was coming home. So I spent 6 weeks that summer, and when I got home, I found I haven't begun to understand this culture, and I was anxious to go back again the following year, and he had no room in his school, so I had already made contacts with someone who was in the regular school system in Nayoro, and they were able to find places for me to help students in high school and junior high school. And I also had adult groups that summer as well. So I joined the twinning committee. Actually, there were 4 of us that year who went, and we were all from this area, and we have all remained with the twinning committee through the years. During the late 60s, the mayor of Nayoro, Mr. Akeda, was interested in having a city twinned with Nayoro. He wanted one in North America. So he wrote to Doreen and Floyd Howlett, who were United Church missionaries there, and asked them if they would know of a place that would twin with Nayoro. And strangely enough, Floyd and Doreen were home in Canada at the time, and they had had a dream of a municipality being twinned with Nayoro because they wanted more understanding following the war. When the Howletts began thinking about it, they thought of Lindsay, because the mayor of Lindsay had been in Young People's with Doreen, and that mayor was John Akins. When Doreen and John got together and talked about the vision that they had, John was excited about it too and thought Lindsay would benefit from knowing more about Japan. So the town councils got together, and in simultaneous ceremonies, August the 1st, 1969, on both sides of the Pacific, the twinning was formally begun. And now Akeda's and the Howlett's dream was a reality. Lindsay sent the first visitor, then the McElroys and Akins visited. Then Mayor Akeda brought a delegation over in July of 1971. The high school exchange program began in 1973. A number of teachers went to Nayoro beginning in 1984. There has been some exchange of sports like curling, and then groups of students from other places like Sir Sanford and Heritage Christian School have come to Lindsay too. Some students who went to Japan with the twinning exchange have made a future of living in Japan and teaching English. Personally, I've been involved since 1983, and because I went 11 times to teach, and as a tourist, I was given many gifts. So I opened my basement with many cases of these artifacts in 1989. And in the 23 years that that display was open, there were over 1,400 adults and children came to see the things. The artifacts are now stored at the Old Jail Museum in Lindsay. The twinning is celebrating 50 years this year, and we who are involved are very proud of what has been accomplished, but we can't be complacent because we need more people to catch the fire that the original people had, and I feel that this is a wonderful community in which to live. It's small enough that you can meet people just on the spur of the moment, someone you haven't seen for years, someone that you may have met professionally, or it may be a long-time friend. And where I live in Bobcaygeon, it's a beautiful community too, and I just thank those who have gone before us and laid the ground rules for a community like this. And I'm thankful for this opportunity to tell others.